Jimmy, thanks so much for your time today. Legislative session does start in, well, when this interview runs, it'll start in a couple days.
It'll start the very next day, actually.
Tuesday? Okay. Before we start about your legislative priorities, though, I want to talk to you for a minute about marijuana. That's going to be probably, if not the biggest conversation talker during the summertime about the ballot initiatives. Definitely one of the big ones. And I know you have some issue with that.
Yes.
Let's talk about that. You oppose the initiative that's on the ballot?
Yes, I do, absolutely. It's well known that there is not enough restriction to make that actually truthful medical marijuana. And one of the things that I want to make sure is that if we're going to allow for the use of a medicine, not a drug, and right now the constitutional amendment, well, that would fundamentally allow anybody to prescribe and be distributed through any means. There's not enough restrictions or regulation on it. Fundamentally, that legalizes marijuana for general consumption. And people say, well, no, it's medical. It's not, because if it was, it would be through a specialist or through a specific doctor, and they would have to follow the prescribed medicine practices are established.
Well, but there's a protocol in place, right? I mean, it's not like I can go down to my doctor and say, I got a headache, can you give me some dope? I mean, there is a process for
Actually, as per that constitutional amendment, yes, you could. You could go down to your doctor and they could write you a prescription for a headache and use medical marijuana, or what they claim to be medical marijuana, as one of the things that you could use.
But why do you think why do you think that would happen?
Why do I think it would happen?
Yeah.
Well, there's a lot of people that do not realize both the positive and negatives of marijuana. You have the people who believe in the use of marijuana that say, well, it's no worse than alcohol. But the truth is 3 marijuana cigarettes have proven to have the same negative effect as 20 cigarettes, so as a pack of cigarettes. You also have the aspect of marijuana having a multiplying effect. The majority of people who recreationally use marijuana have also drink, and subsequently the death through fatalities, vehicle fatalities I should say, have increased 24%. So the amount of people that have went out drinking and driving that have actually also had marijuana in their blood, well, that's increased by 24%.
But we're not talking about legalizing marijuana for recreational use.
Well, if you have anybody from a chiropractor to any kind of medical person authorized to give or prescribe marijuana, and not any specific type of marijuana in a general aspect, with no specific format of where to get the marijuana, how to make sure it's safe or anything like that, fundamentally you could have a chiropractor say, yes, you need marijuana because you have a sore back.
But I thought when there's a constitutional amendment passed, or that's on the ballot that gets approved, somebody writes some rules, some regulations, just like when you guys pass a law, there's an agency that writes the rules. This is how it works.
Right.
Wouldn't this be the same way?
Right. Well, to some extent, there would be the ability to put some restraints, but if you notice, once again, whenever we do constitutional amendments, if you go and you start putting more restraints to a constitutional amendment, that's when the lawsuits come in. So if you get ahead of it, what we want to do is we want to prescribe it and not need the constitutional amendment. We want to say the Florida House appreciates the fact that there are people that can actually use true cannabinoids, which is the actual useful aspect of marijuana as a medicine. People don't even realize right now a doctor can prescribe THC. Now that's a Schedule II aspect, and that's the thing that can actually get you high. But a Schedule I, which is the cannabinoids, which cannot get you high, a doctor cannot prescribe.
Okay, well, I don't have cancer, I'm not in a situation where I would need that. But there are people who swear by it.
Well, swear buying it and science is two different things. I mean, people will swear by liniments and oils all through their lives, and if you'll do this, the Atkins diet, it will save your life and you'll drop weight. They'll swear by it. We don't want to go by swear by. We want scientific data and facts. We want to make sure that the research that is currently being done and that is supported by actual scientific data from the FDA, from certain colleges that are currently enrolled in these studies. We want that kind of information. We don't want the populace to say, well, no, it's helped me during cancer. Well, where is the scientific data behind that? A lot of people don't realize it's not the THC, that is actually being the helpful part. It's the cannabinoids, the non-intoxicating aspect of it, that is helpful. And if you allow for just a general use of marijuana, like coming through the constitutional amendment, you're fundamentally going to be putting out the wrong item. It's not going to be the medicine, it's going to be the drug. And
So are you sponsoring something that kind of offsets this?
Actually, Representative Matt Gaetz and Representative Katie Edwards, Republican, Democrat, they are bipartisan working to pass legislation on a drug that's called Charlotte's Web. Charlotte's Web is being used in Colorado, is currently being studied, is starting FDA trials, or not trials, but FDA studies within the college systems to find out, what's the positive and negatives on that. Supposedly there's a study in Israel as far as the use of cannabinoids.
What is it?
It's cannabinoids. Charlotte Web is marijuana that has been scientifically adjusted to the fact that the THC, the part that can get you intoxicated or high, is so low you could smoke it all day and not get high. It is actually lower in THC content than the THC oil or cannabinoid oils that you're going to find in health food stores that you can already buy.
So okay, so what's the
Well, the positive
what's the point of it?
The point is that then can be used as a medicine to help people and not be misused as a drug to get stoned.
Is it FDA approved now?
No, it's all going through all the trials. And we
Then
want to.
what's the point of passing a state law that to receive something that's not been FDA approved?
Well, it will encourage it.
Okay. But you wouldn't be able to get it.
Well, hopefully by the time law came through and everything, if we do this by law, hopefully that will encourage either the FDA or whoever to push it through. But also what we want to do is we want to define what medical marijuana is. And that's the biggest gap of what's in this constitutional amendment. There isn't a definition. Plus, it's not your grandfather's marijuana also. People think that marijuana today is the same thing as it was 30 years ago during the beatnik days and stuff like that. The amount of THC that they've gotten to ramp up in marijuana is coming overseas illegally from Mexico. And matter of fact, you see the drug bust that recently went on. All that marijuana is high in THC. So not somewhat, but extremely high. You add that with alcohol or other drugs, and it's a plan for disaster.
Okay. Let's move. I appreciate it. But one more quick thing is, how do you account for the fact that polls show that Floridians support this?
Well, I support medical marijuana, but they're not being told the truth of what this is. This is not medical marijuana. This is not a defined aspect of marijuana, and it's not a defined use. It's not a defined pathway for prescription to an individual.
Okay. Look forward to that debate during the summertime. As we've talked before, as a House member, you're allowed to file 6 bills. Senators can file a million of them because there's only 40 of those guys. There's 60 of you guys.
Yes.
And
120.
120. Sorry, 120 of you guys. Thank you. What is your and because there's only 6. There's only 6. So what's your big thing this year?
Well, first and foremost, we're going to do what's called the VMAS PCB. The PCB is proposed committee bill, and that's actually an additional bill that I could run. That's not from me, but from the committee, and I'll be running that. And it's better known as the Florida GI Bill, and that is without a doubt the biggest project I'm going to be running this year. It allows for a waiver of the out-of-state tuition for veterans who move to Florida. It establishes hiring preferences within the government sector for veterans and their spouses. It authorizes, through law, the ability for the private sector to establish preferential hiring practices, because also that has to be in statute, because as a private sector business, you can't just say, well, we prefer to hire vets. Technically, that's illegal. But if we say that you can, that will help. It will get rid of the aspect of having to wait 6 months to a year to be able to be enrolled into a Florida nursing home if you're a veteran, because they have the Florida nursing homes. Well, yeah, right now you have to wait a year, okay? Or I believe it's a year for that one. We're going to waive that and bring that back down to as soon as you're a true Florida resident and can prove it, you'll be eligible to use the nursing homes. Also, what we're going to do is, we recently attached this, we're going to do a Florida is for Veterans Incorporated, nonprofit organization that will work under the Florida Department of Veterans Affairs. And subsequently, they will advertise around the nation to veterans. They will work with everything from Enterprise Florida to Career Source to make sure that we know what skills are needed in the workforce, know what skills the veterans have, and put those two things together. We want to make ourselves the most veteran-friendly or veteran-strong state. We want the next greatest generation. I mean, think about these. World War II, these guys got out, got educated, drove the economy for the entire nation. We want that in Florida first.
Well, do you have any idea what the unemployment rate is like for returning Iraqi veterans from Iraq and Afghanistan?
Yes, it was on average 5 to 7% higher than what the average rate was. So we have continued to work on that and drive it lower. But the problem is that the veterans who are getting out, it isn't just about the unemployment, it's about knowing what is out there. So the Florida's for Veterans Incorporated, one of the things that they'll be championing is what we do have. Okay, so there are veterans right now that have no clue of the additional benefits. In Tallahassee, I have the new copy of the entire pamphlet. Their MOS skills, military occupational skills, actually qualify for college courses. So that would make it cheaper for them. We did, this office, we did preferential enrollment. So if a college, a government college, or state college, I should say, has preferential enrollment for courses for, say, a high school athlete or a scholar, well, you have to do that for veterans as well, the same aspect. But a lot of people, once again, they don't know. It's hard to get that
This
word
seems
out.
like a pretty good idea. How did this? Where did this come from?
Well, the Florida GI Bill, which the tuition waiver portion of it is the C.W. Bill Young bill. His part of it, he's always been like the leader on veterans issues. Well, Representative Kathleen Peters and myself and others have constantly been working on veterans issues. Well, one of the things that's been laying in the background is the out-of-state tuition aspect of it. So if a veteran comes back to Florida, let's say you grew up in Florida and you want to return, but you have been moving your driver's license or things like that from state to state, or you were maybe thinking about living someplace else and you established a short-term residency there, thinking about it, but changed your mind, came to Florida. Or like myself, I lost my driver's license 3 to 6 months before I retired, and after 19 plus years of being a Florida resident, and just before I retired, I became a Georgia resident. But that's always been an issue. So now we're going to waive that fee, save them about $15,000 a year in tuition, and get them to come to Florida. And let me tell you, I have some that are in CF right now that are out-of-state veterans, and they told me, you know, I want to stay here. It doesn't matter if you pass this or not, but I want to stay here. So they're going to get college educated. They want to stay here. One wants to do a business. The other one wants to get in the health industry. I mean, thinking about that.
Is there anyone
Opposed?
Opposed? I mean,
No, that is one of those pieces of legislation. You know, I jokingly tell people all the time, basically this is a home run. All I got to do is run the bases and not trip.
well, what would be tripping in this case?
Well, I mean, getting up there and forgetting what the key issues in the bill is, or getting up there and babbling or rambling. You know, basically, there's almost no way for me to mess this up. It is one of the greatest things that in the House, when they wanted the person to run this piece of legislation, there's other veterans. And it's absolutely phenomenal that they said, you know what, Jimmy, you're the guy for this.
Good, good. That's interesting. Let's shift for a second about the Citrus Memorial Hospital bill. As we speak right now, that's still being drafted?
Yes, yes. We're getting revisions from both lawyers.
Okay. What I'm wondering about that, now, this is the bill that does two things. It sets a maximum millage that the hospital board trustees can file or can set. Also sets up, in some vague way, a structure for a trust.
Right.
The tax thing limits the tax to 0.25 mils. However, the stuff I read also said they can jack it back up to 3 mils if there's a lawsuit between.
Well, basically what it is you can't make it go away completely because you have to have a catch-all mechanism that, let's just say HCA decides to leave Citrus County. Let's say they said, you know what, we changed our mind 3-5 years down the road. Well, you need some mechanism to allow for our local community to have a hospital no matter what. So there needs to be some kind of mechanism to allow for some kind of taxation. The aspect of raising that tax is just that. Let's say they decided to initiate leaving the county, or they had some kind of change in their business model that was not aligned with the lease agreement, we could then ramp up taxes and be able to actually have an organization to handle all the challenges.
But couldn't they come back? Couldn't you set the millage at like nothing .0000?
No.
Couldn't you do that? And then let's say that doomsday scenario occurs. Couldn't the hospital board come back to you at that time and say we need to readdress this bill and bring the tax back up?
Right. By law, you can't bring it down to a flat zero. You have to have something. I can't remember what the statute is, but basically you have to have some kind of taxing authority. Second of all, that can only be done during this session period. So if it happened in between, there's what, 8 months sometimes? If you are in a redistricting or after a census, the sessions are done at different times. You could potentially have 8 months in which nothing is done, or you can't do anything. So fundamentally,
but even now, even at a quarter mill, so the quarter mill is in there is like a worst case scenario type thing.
yes, quarter mill is just basically to keep things floating and operating as far as having that structure there. So we want the lowest possible millage because we do not want to use somebody else's money, but you need to have that structure established and continuing.
But why, again, the most recent language I looked at, why would you allow a loophole that allows them to jack it up to 3 mills if there's a lawsuit?
Well, it's not a loophole. Why have a mechanism there to stand up and fix a problem, say if HCA left, if they can't raise the money to establish a board, hire a lawyer?
That's not what that says. I mean, I get the idea that they could raise it in order to fight a lawsuit. It sounds like
Potentially they might be able to. If HCA decides to sue the board of trustees, then
or the trustees sue them,
or vice versa, then fundamentally, yeah, if somebody wants to do wrong to Citrus County, we need to have the availability to have the trust, or not the trust, the
Jimmy,
hospital
these are
board.
people. This is an organization between the two groups, the hospital board and the foundation.
See, once again, you're looking at yesterday. Okay.
Okay.
In the future, it won't be the foundation. It won't be the same people who are currently there. Things will have
It'll
changed.
be the board of trustees.
Well, the board of trustees haven't always been the same people. You make it sound as if
Okay,
there
well,
was only the same
this
board
current
members.
board of trustees,
Right.
and the trustees that have been on the board in the last 2 or 3 years, along with the foundation, I realize the foundation won't be there, but among with those combined have spent $10 to $11 million
Once
in legal
again,
fees.
that's all what
lawsuits.
they did before.
So are
You're
you
not
suggesting
talking-
that's not going to happen tomorrow? If it's
Oh, definitely. Because otherwise, you're talking about a short term in the history of the entire hospital situation. It's actually been a very short term, and just because on both sides there's been lawsuits and there's been legislation, does not mean that that's been every single day of the history of the hospital board or the foundation.
But it's a good chunk of the dough they've spent is on legal fees, right?
Well, I wouldn't say a good chunk, that's a current chunk. If you look at the history of the money that's been spent from the hospital board and the foundation, you know.
From 2010,
Well,
do
once
you have
again,
any idea?
you're talking about a possible negative. I'm talking about ensuring that if something bad happens between the deal from HCA and the hospital board that negatively affects Citrus County, we need to be ready to handle that. And the only way to be ready to handle that isn't to wait for legislation to pass again in the future. It isn't to wait for the possibility of somebody in a position of authority to deal with it. It needs to be handled.
Okay.
And this is one of those things when you send it in, you say, do I look at the negative of yesterday, or am I realistic in having the governance and the structure? Because it's one thing to come out there and talk platitudes in public, but you need to have actual governance and the ability to react to situations, and that's where I'm going to put that in that legislation.
We're about out of time. I just want to ask you, we are in an election year again. Are you running for election?
Well, since we're in the office, technically I can't tell you anything about campaign items, but I think you should watch the news.
Okay. Put your right eyebrow up if you are, if it's something you are thinking about doing. Something.
Well, I would definitely say we're looking forward to a campaign season.
Okay, great.
So,
Jimmy, thanks very much for your time. I sure appreciate it. And good luck on Tallahassee.
all right. Well, thank you, Mike.
Thanks a lot.
Perfect, guys. 15